There was always something happening. There was always collateral damage sort of going on, and sometimes it was funny, and sometimes
She had the kind of smile people trusted instantly. Warm, effortless, and unforgettable in a way that made strangers feel like they had known her for years. It wasn't just about beauty or charm. It was something deeper, something almost comforting. The kind of presence that made audiences lean in without even realizing it. For years, she was everywhere. On television screens, in glossy magazine covers, in quiet conversations across America, where people spoke about her as if she were part of their own lives. She wasn't just famous, she was familiar, a symbol of comfort, stability, and something that felt safe in an unpredictable world. But behind that carefully composed image, something didn't quite add up. There was a subtle distance, a quiet mystery that no one could fully explain. Because at the very peak of her career, when everything seemed perfectly aligned and success appeared effortless, she made a decision that no one saw coming. She disappeared. Not in a dramatic, headline-making way. There was no scandal, no emotional goodbye, no final performance to mark the end. Just a quiet step back, a slow fading from the spotlight that left people confused and searching for answers. Why would someone walk away from fame when they had everything others spent their lives chasing? What did she see that others didn't? And what was really happening behind the scenes while the world continued watching her smile, unaware that it might not have been the full story? Long before the fame and recognition, before the cameras and expectations, she was simply a girl living an ordinary life, one that gave no indication of the extraordinary path ahead. There were no flashing lights, no industry connections, no grand plans of becoming a public figure. Just quiet days filled with simple routines and dreams that felt distant, almost unrealistic. Yet even in those early years, there were signs, small but undeniable hints of something different. A natural curiosity that set her apart, a creative spark that couldn't be ignored, a presence that seemed to draw attention even in the smallest of rooms. She wasn't loud or demanding, she didn't seek attention in obvious ways, but people noticed her. There was something about her energy, something subtle yet powerful, that made her stand out without trying. As she grew older, that quiet spark began to evolve into something stronger, a desire to explore, to create, to step beyond the boundaries of the life she had always known. It wasn't about fame at first. It was about possibility, about answering a question she couldn't ignore. What if there was more? And like many who feel that pull, she eventually made a decision that would change everything. It wasn't easy, it wasn't safe, but it was necessary. She left behind comfort and familiarity, stepping into uncertainty with nothing but belief guiding her forward. Because sometimes the most life-changing journeys begin not with certainty, but with a single, quiet choice. The path to success is rarely as smooth as it appears from the outside, and for her, it was filled with challenges that tested her in ways she never expected. There were auditions that led nowhere, moments where hope was built up only to be quietly taken away. Opportunities seemed just within reach, only to slip through her fingers at the last second. With each rejection, doubt grew stronger, whispering questions she didn't want to answer. Was she good enough? Was this dream even realistic? To survive, she took whatever work she could find, jobs that paid the bills but had nothing to do with the life she was trying to build. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Yet despite everything, she refused to give up. There was something inside her that wouldn't allow it, a quiet determination that kept pushing her forward, even when logic suggested she should stop. And then, just when it seemed like nothing was changing, something unexpected happened. A chance encounter, a moment so small it almost went unnoticed. It didn't feel like success at the time. In fact, it seemed temporary, almost accidental. But moments like these often carry more weight than they appear to. Because sometimes the turning points that define a life don't arrive with excitement or recognition. They arrive quietly, disguised as something ordinary, only revealing their importance much later. It wasn't a major breakthrough in the way people imagine success stories. There was no big announcement, no leading role that instantly changed her life. Instead, it was something much smaller. A single appearance, a brief moment on screen that lasted only seconds. But those seconds were enough. Enough for people to notice something different about her. It wasn't just her appearance, it was the way she carried herself, the confidence that felt natural rather than forced. There was a presence she brought to the screen, a sense of authenticity that made her stand out in a way that couldn't be easily explained. And just like that, things began to shift. Doors that had once been firmly closed started to open. Opportunities that once felt impossible slowly became real. The industry began to see her differently, not as someone trying to make it, but as someone who belonged. And for the first time, she wasn't invisible anymore. But with that recognition came something else, something less visible, but far more powerful. Expectation. Because success doesn't just bring opportunity, it brings pressure. It creates standards you're expected to maintain, roles you're expected to play, and an image you're expected to protect. And while everything seemed to be falling into place, she was about to discover that fame always comes with a cost, one that isn't always visible at first. Success didn't just change her life, it changed how the world saw her. Almost overnight, an image was created, a version of her that people connected with, admired, and expected to see again and again. At first, it felt like a reward. Recognition brought stability, and stability brought a sense of security she had never experienced before. But over time, that same image began to feel limiting. Casting directors saw her a certain way, and they wanted her to stay that way. Audiences expected consistency, familiarity, something predictable, and no matter how much she tried to explore different roles or express different sides of herself, she kept being pulled back into the same identity. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, but slowly it became clear she was no longer fully in control of her own story. The image that had once helped her succeed was now shaping her decisions, her opportunities, even her sense of self. What started as a blessing began to feel like a cage, because when people stop seeing who you truly are and only see who they expect you to be, something important begins to fade. And that realization, though quiet, can change everything.
While everything looked perfect from the outside, the reality behind the scenes was far more complicated. Long hours turned into exhausting routines, where rest became a luxury rather than a necessity. The pressure to perform, to maintain a certain image, to meet expectations that never seemed to end, it all began to build over time. Relationships, too, became more complicated. What appeared genuine on the surface often carried hidden tensions beneath. There were moments of frustration, disagreements that never reached the public, and emotional struggles that remained carefully hidden. Because in the entertainment world, perception is everything. What people see is curated, polished, and controlled, but what they don't see, the stress, the doubt, the emotional weight of constantly being on, is often far more significant. And slowly, those unseen pressures began to take their toll, not in dramatic, obvious ways, but in quiet, internal shifts that changed how she felt about everything around her. The life she had worked so hard to build no longer felt as fulfilling as it once did, and that realization was impossible to ignore. From the outside, her personal life seemed just as perfect as her career. There was romance, partnership, the idea of having someone who understood her in a way others couldn't. It created the image of balance, success combined with emotional stability, but reality is rarely that simple. What began as something exciting and hopeful slowly revealed deeper complications. Small issues that were easy to ignore at first grew into patterns that couldn't be overlooked. There were moments of doubt, moments where things didn't feel quite right, but were pushed aside in the hope that they would resolve themselves. Over time, however, those doubts turned into questions, and those questions demanded answers. Because sometimes the person you trust the most turns out to be different from who they claim to be. And when that realization happens, it doesn't just affect one part of your life, it changes everything. The sense of stability she once relied on began to feel uncertain, and the gap between appearance and reality became impossible to ignore. There comes a moment in every difficult journey when everything reaches a limit. For her, that moment wasn't sudden, it built gradually over time. Pressure, disappointment, emotional exhaustion, all of it accumulated quietly until it became too much to carry. And then, one day, something shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way others could see, but internally. A realization. A moment of clarity that changed how she viewed her life. She understood that she couldn't continue living the same way, following expectations that no longer aligned with who she truly was. The world still saw success, still saw someone rising, thriving, achieving everything they had set out to do. But internally, she was searching for something different, something deeper, something real. And once that realization takes hold, it becomes impossible to ignore. Because when you begin to question everything, the life you once accepted without hesitation suddenly feels unfamiliar. The decision didn't come easily, but when it did, it was undeniable. She stepped back, not in a way that demanded attention, but quietly, intentionally. Roles became fewer, appearances became rare, and over time, her presence in the spotlight began to fade. People noticed, of course. Some assumed it was failure, others believed it was a temporary break. But the truth was far more complex. Walking away from fame isn't always about losing something. Sometimes it's about choosing something else, something that can't be measured by recognition or success. And while the world continued asking questions, she was focused on something entirely different, redefining what her life meant without the expectations that had once shaped it. Away from the spotlight, she discovered something unexpected: peace, a different kind of success, one that didn't rely on applause or public validation. She explored new interests, built a life that felt more authentic, more grounded, more aligned with who she truly was. For the first time in years, she was in control, not of how she was seen, but of how she lived. Looking back, fame no longer seemed like the ultimate goal. It was an experience, one that came with both rewards and consequences. And while the world still wondered why she walked away, perhaps they were asking the wrong question. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't to stay, it's to leave. Not every story ends with fame. Some end with peace. And maybe that was her greatest success of all.